Every space game out there has something going for it. The various interpretations of the future are what make the genre so interesting, and they're all bound to have some overlap because of that. Star Citizen and Starfield, despite the names and their settings, are actually quite different interpretations. While one is strictly multiplayer, sandbox-oriented, and leaning more on simulation, the other aims for a traditional RPG approach to the single-player immersive arcade game. One has been in development a few years longer than the other, and has remained playable for more than half that time. The other will be seeing a traditional release in less than a month. Both of these games are actually pretty different, but they have enough similarities that may allow Starfield to offer the experience that some Star Citizen players have been looking for. But it's not quite as simple as just looking at the feature list. So today we'll be taking a look at the actual design of these games and why they offer vastly different experiences. This isn't a versus, there is no winner, I'm just aiming to provide you with some extra context. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. When Star Citizen calls itself a space sim, it's essentially aiming to provide a life in space. There isn't meant to be main gameplay. More, you're supposed to pursue whatever it is you enjoy and find a way to make money doing it. Let's take mining for example. In Starfield, mining will be used for three main purposes: crafting, modding, and building. It is a means to an end in that it fuels other activities. The actual act of mining is a tool. Survey the planet, explore until you find a node, point the laser at the node, break the node, and move over whatever pops out. Click a button, complete an action, and get on with your day. The primary goal here is to collect resources and let you get back to the fun stuff in the game. In Star Citizen, mining is a career. One of many, though there are only a few that offer an interesting experience at the time of writing. And while mining is also meant to be a core component of crafting and building, and even other game loops like cargo hauling, like I said, it's also a self-contained career. If you're going mining, first you're going to need to survey the planet, which will require you to fly around an atmosphere periodically scanning. Before you head out though, you're going to want to go to the refinery. Find some of the tools and gadgets that are going to help you with the specific materials you're looking for. Once you're all equipped and flying out on planet, and you find some rocks, you're going to have to determine the makeup of that rock. Would the given mass and percentage lead to the cargo you're looking for? You'll also be able to use hand-placeable gadgets, limited-use consumables, and passive laser attachments, which can all be manually changed out. And of course, you can bring some of your friends along to help you crack the bigger rocks you come across. And this changes as you bring in extra ships too, as the effects of different lasers stack on each other in interesting ways. The various loadouts and strategies are entirely up to you, as there are many ways to tackle a mining scenario, and given the multi-material makeups of each rock, the situation is always changing. This method of mining is more like that of something like Elite Dangerous, as opposed to something like No Man's Sky, which more resembles Starfield. These two different styles have their own pros and cons. The choice of choosing one or another isn't a shortcoming, it's simply a design decision. An RPG is more focused on giving you the tools to go out and write your story, while an MMO space sim is going to slow you down, make an event of everything you're doing, and encourage you to bring some friends along. It's an important distinction. You don't have to mine for resources in Star Citizen if you don't want to. You don't have to shoot down pirates or transport goods or loot bunkers. You can just have a friend, an organization, or some random in chat do it for you. Multiplayer games are going to be built with this in mind, so they can afford to make gameplay that might be considered crucial a bit more niche. You could see this reflected in ship flight as well. Flying from space to the ground is hard to pull off, not just technically, but design-wise. Getting an immersive feel with the proper scale and flight times from a space down to the ground that feel long enough to be convincing but also short enough to not become a complete slog every time is pretty hard. Star Citizen has had to change the experience a couple times to try and get it right. And then you have to deal with the fact that some planets, being much larger, have bigger atmospheres. If every planet has a different experience flying from space to ground, you can't choose a one-size-fits-all approach. We've only seen a few attempts at this, and of the ones that are there, there's a lot of interesting loading and secondary map gameplay going on. But all of these games are space sims of some sort. Starfield is, once again, a game focused on letting you write your story, play your role. Cinematic approaches to planets are visceral, immersive, and still pretty novel, but likely not worth the work for the experience in a game like this. It's not just the approach though. Flying amongst the clouds, skirting low over the ground or water, and simply controlling your ship and atmosphere as you move around the game carries a lot of functionality with it. Weather, gravity, wind resistance, enemy fire, and other factors will all change the skill ceiling needed to fly ships in atmosphere. And when you're playing a multiplayer game that's more dependent on the skills of the player rather than perks or skill points that you can get from the game itself, that skill ceiling is going to make a big difference when you're assaulting a compound with some NPCs on the outside with rocket launchers. But even up in space, the same still applies. Starfield does seem to offer a bit of a deep space combat experience, a power triangle to determine your ship's focus, sub-targeting to disable ships rather than kill, and the ability to board other ships either to take those ships for your own, plunder the goods, or scuttle the remains. It looks like fun. It looks like more than I would have expected, in fact. Being able to board other ships also seems like a really fun mechanic. But it's built for a controller, it's meant to be just part of the larger game, and it's not at all trying to go up against the space sims out there that we know. In Star Citizen, there is enough variance in not just the flight model but the ships themselves for spaceflight to contain hundreds of hours of entertainment and an entire career of combat. From the thruster placement, changing your angular acceleration, to the ability to customize the power output of each component, to the balance of inertia and flight maneuvering, these are the type of mechanics you see in games like Elite Dangerous or DCS. Because these games are again trying to build a career out of this gameplay, not just a tool. You should be able to specialize and work in dogfighting, missile boating, turret gunning, or even being an onboard engineer who keeps the ship running. Engineering on its own is actually a huge part of the game as well. Players will be able to tune ships before launch, maintain power, life support, and resource distribution, or even sabotage other ships from the inside if they want to. And not all players need to do any of these things, but ship combat and maintenance both need to feature enough scale and opportunity for players who do want to do those things when they're living in space. A life in space, with a multitude of careers in a sandbox environment. This is what Star Citizen aims to offer. And while it is still moving painfully slow and causing enough frustration to leave my comments section on red for a bit, it is coming together. This is why in most of my videos I say that most players shouldn't be trying to play Star Citizen right now. Sure, it might be fun to watch, even jump in every quarter or two to try out the new features, but this video isn't about comparing the actual game experience of either of these games. It's about looking at their design. That's why right up front, if I was telling you which game to play as a space nerd, I'd point you towards Starfield right now. But for those who are wondering why they might choose one or the other, that's what this video is for. And that's why a life in space is not why somebody should probably be picking up Starfield. Yeah, it might give you some of that experience, especially as an RPG coming from Bethesda, but that's not their primary goal, and that's not a bad thing. While Star Citizen may aim to offer a lot of options, the experience only goes so far, even when it does finally reach a polished level. Part of what has made the game take so long has been building the game engine. And while they spent the majority of the last 10 years doing so, the creation engine has been able to grow and mature in some way for more than 22 years. Groundbreaking systems like Radiant AI and Radiant Stories have had a lot of time to develop, not to mention things like base building, crafting, and other game systems from past Bethesda games that have been already made release ready. Not only have these features been around for multiple games already, you simply won't find systems like the Radiant systems in most other games. Being able to experience missions like the Dark Brotherhood series from Oblivion in a space setting is very possibly not going to happen in a game like Star Citizen. In a similar manner as an RPG, the gameplay is heavily based around customizing your character, determining their skills and specialty, and progressing at a rate that the game actually lays out for you, determining the pacing, narrative, and cinematic experience for you in some ways. While Star Citizen has proposed a small skill system for players in the game, something I'm not really looking forward to, the game has historically focused on the idea of your in-game skills reflecting you as a player as opposed to the character that you've built. This is apparent in the mining gameplay we looked at earlier and is something we notice they're aiming for in combat as well. Bethesda, on the other hand, is masterful at giving players the perks, skills, and attributes that really allow for the exact experience you want in a relatively open game that is still much more heavily guided than something like Star Citizen. One of the best things about Bethesda games have always been those skill trees and trying to build out the perfect pickpocket or the absolute monster melee-only character. Both of these games are going to play to their strengths. So when it comes to gameplay, there's a freedom of scale to what's possible in Star Citizen though it is unfinished, buggy, and a hefty time investment. Starfield will offer a more polished experience, but the focus definitely falls on different aspects of the game. Speaking of scale, let's talk about the other segment of these games that are similar but quite different. Planets, cities, locations, and just being in space itself. Planets in Star Citizen are beautiful, and there's something about being able to look out over the horizon at any pixel of space and know you can walk, drive, or fly there with your friends. But Starfield is working with a more mature rendering engine, and it shows. The lighting and general biome art look great. They also come with a wide variety of flora and fauna for you to research, building on that exploration gameplay. Star Citizen has not added aliens to the game just yet, and while consumables and other objects to find during your explorations exist, they are few and far between, and there's not a great way of finding them in the game right now. Now, I'll be first to say Star Citizen planets are hugely lacking in what it aims to deliver. Currently, you'll be able to track caves offering both personal and ship access, rivers, mountains, valleys, clouds, geysers, obsidian fields, frozen lakes, etc., etc. There are a lot of biomes in this game already. But actual points of interest are still very lacking. Now, those are two different development teams, so there are reasons for this. But they're just not there yet. Refineries, mining outposts, farming settlements, bunkers, there are tons of location possibilities in a game like this. And Starfield will have many of them at launch, likely with some very interesting quest lines and loot to find as well. Remember that Radiant story system I mentioned? That system will support unique gameplay for each player, likely on many of the planets you can visit. It's the way things were done in Skyrim, it's the way things were done in Oblivion, it'll be the way things are done in Starfield. And that's what really sets apart Star Citizen and Starfield. Over the next couple of years, Star Citizen will be adding plenty of missions and lore to the game, but I doubt they're going to be as engaging as the systems Bethesda has had such a long time to cultivate anytime soon. We're still just getting the mission archetypes right now, so the narrative fluff may not come for a little while longer. So when it comes to things to do on whatever planet you're visiting, at least for now, Starfield's going to offer much more. They both will provide FPS opportunities, differing gravities, simulated light coming from the star, and convincing vegetation and biomes. The details are there, but I think we'll need to see more from Starfield to really know how the planets ultimately stack up when it releases. Though there is the big detail of base building as well. Let's not forget that. Then there are the ships. For many, this is the most important part of a space game, and I'll tell you now, the game that will end up having the more interesting ship experience is going to be Star Citizen. This game is funded, hyped, and based around the spaceships, and the amount of detail that's put into their structure, design, scale, and visual language is actually, some would say, too much. It doesn't mean every implementation is a win, but being able to explore more than 100 unique chassis inside and out, changing out their components, using their unique features, and enjoying space with your friends while they fly to and from planet surfaces never really gets old. But Starfield is no slouch here. The game is not based around the spaceship, thus its design doesn't require you to focus on them. But there does seem to be some good focus on the experience nonetheless, being a space game and all. For one, you'll be sharing the space with your NPC crew. Don't even think about asking me to do that in Star Citizen right now. Having people around with you on your spaceship is going to make it feel like a much more alive and homey place, and I think that's going to make a big difference when you're on board. But for a game that is so focused on the character-driven experience, a lot of love has been put into the design of these spaceship interiors as well. They look great, distinct, and believable, though I do wonder if they actually correlate to the exterior of the ship. Being able to build and customize your own ship will obviously present some limitations for the more in-depth ship systems that they're doing with Star Citizen, but the idea of customizing a ship in whatever way you want likely vastly outweighs those benefits in a game that focuses so much on customization. And so, when it comes to just existing in space, both games again aim for different experiences. There is no winner, there is no right choice, and fans of space games, simply put, are not a singular entity. You could be focusing on every aspect of going out into space, keeping your ship running, maintaining a group of friends who each own a ship that's needed for different things in a mission, and understanding the local economy depending on which planet you call home. Or you could build deep relationships, pursue endless dungeon crawling, build your character to be exactly what you want, and possibly guide forward an entire civilization as the hero of a story. The design of each game plays to different narratives in different ways, and quite obviously on very different timelines. So, which is right for you specifically? There are many more ways these two games differ, and many places that other space games will simply be better choices as well. But as a fan of big, high-budget space games, multiplayer encounters, and RPGs, I couldn't be more pleased with the choices we're starting to see now and in the near and distant future. And if for whatever reason you can't or don't want to play both, if you're looking for a quality game to sink time into and play for fun this year, my money would be on Starfield. Why? Well, the most obvious reason is its traditional release coming in just days. While Star Citizen remains playable and quite fun when it works and continues to build something that hasn't been done at its scale, it is still undergoing some significant changes to the game engine to reach that scale, including a server meshing technology to allow for more and more concurrent players in a single city, spaceship, or outpost. And don't get me wrong, for some people Star Citizen is perfect right now, and you will have a lot of fun in it. It's just not for everyone. Granted, I don't know how Starfield will actually play when it comes out. It could be great, it could flop, or it could be middle of the park. No matter what you believe, the developers of Star Citizen have doubled down on a vision that many people want to see happen, and despite the hiccups in the process, they've continued to build elements people want to see and keep the experience playable. Kinda. And while I think Starfield would be the better option for the majority of players right now and in the near future, Star Citizen has an immense amount of potential as a multiplayer game that has the entire company dedicated to it. And there are reasons so many players still play despite its currently troublesome state. It's a space game fan's dream, and it's not going anywhere soon. In addition, you don't have to spend the $45 entrance fee to play. Several times a year the game goes free to play where you can experience what it has to offer. And despite what you might hear, you don't need to spend more than that $45 to unlock the entire game itself. So yes, I fully believe that Starfield is a game many players were looking for when they joined Star Citizen, and I believe many players will prefer it. The character customization, base building, possible quests, notable characters, customizable vehicles, and open-ended encounters are not something space game fans have had for a long time. And Starfield could fill that void while also introducing many new players to the space game genre, and probably many still to Star Citizen itself. But the difference in design means either game will continue to carve out its own unique and healthy community, and both will likely have their fair share of bugs and problems in the meantime. Many will play both, some will play just one. You should consider what it is you're looking for in a space game. Forget about the headlines, forget about jokes, forget about memes. Check either game out for yourself, even beyond this video, and do what makes you happy. Many watching this video probably know me from my Star Citizen coverage, but I come from a more RPG-focused background, primarily due to games like Mass Effect, Deus Ex, Knights of the Old Republic, and The Elder Scrolls. But I'll be continuing to cover Starfield, Star Citizen, and other space games every week for as long as I can. And if you're into space games, I hope you'll join me. If you're looking for more content, I also have 2 podcasts on my second channel, one of which runs every week with a new guest, and another which runs with 4 guests every month, and other long-form content as well as my live streams right here on this channel. You'll be able to catch the latest podcast episode looking at Starfield lore on the channel shortly after this video goes live. I do look forward to all the completely civil and joyous comments down below, and if you're looking to get into deeper discussions about these games, you can always join my Discord channel below as well. I hope you learned something new in this video, and I'll catch you in the next.